The Los Angeles Rams don't need Myles Garrett, but that's exactly why they're dangerous. Because when a team doesn't need to make a move and still considers it anyway, that's when you know they're thinking about something bigger than just improving the roster. They're thinking about timing, they're thinking about windows, and they're thinking about one last push before everything changes. Let's start with the context. The Los Angeles Rams are already aggressive. That's part of their identity under Les Snead and Sean McVay. They've traded picks before, they've gone all in before, and it worked. Now they're hovering in that same space again, competitive, close, but not clearly dominant. At the same time, the Cleveland Browns quietly restructure Garrett's contract. On paper, it's financial flexibility. In reality, it's optionality. They've made it easier to move him if they choose to. And that's where the Rams enter the conversation. The obvious narrative is straightforward. Garrett is the best defensive player potentially available. You add him, your pass rush becomes elite. You pair him with young edge talent, and suddenly your defense can close games. That's how you win in the playoffs. Pressure, disruption, forced mistakes. So yes, from a football standpoint, it makes sense. But here's where it gets complicated. Because the Rams aren't building for the long term right now. They're operating inside a very specific timeline, the Matthew Stafford era, and that window is narrowing. Every decision they make has to answer one question. Does this maximize right now without collapsing what comes next? Let's go deeper. Garrett doesn't just add production. He changes how games are played. Offenses adjust protections before the snap. Quarterbacks speed up their reads, and under pressure, decision-making deteriorates. That's where playoff games swing, not on perfect drives, but on disrupted ones. Clipping moment number one. Garrett doesn't win you games with sacks. He wins them by forcing quarterbacks into bad decisions. Think about how that fits with the Rams. Their offense is still capable. Their coaching is elite. Their roster is balanced. But what they lack at times is control in high-pressure moments, the ability to dictate terms defensively. Garrett gives you that. He doesn't complement your system. He becomes your system. So why wouldn't they do it? Because of the cost. We're not talking about a single first-round pick. We're talking about multiple premium assets, future flexibility, potentially young defensive pieces like Jared Verse or Byron Young. That's not just a trade. That's a commitment to a specific version of the future. And here's the hidden factor. The Rams aren't just evaluating Garrett. They're evaluating what happens after Stafford. Because once that era ends, everything changes. Quarterback uncertainty, roster turnover, identity reset. If you trade away future picks now, you're making that transition harder, more fragile, more dependent on short-term success. Clipping moment number two. This isn't about adding Myles Garrett. It's about choosing between today and what comes after Stafford. Now let's identify the turning point. It's not whether Garrett is available. It's not even the trade package. It's the Rams' internal belief about how close they really are. If they believe they were one piece away last season, if they believe pressure was the missing element, then this move becomes logical, aggressive, but logical. But if they believe their current roster can compete as is, then adding Garrett becomes unnecessary risk because you're solving a problem that might not actually exist. And that's where decision-making under pressure comes in, because the Rams are in a divisional arms race. The San Francisco 49ers, the Seattle Seahawks, these are physical, competitive teams. Margins are thin, and in those environments, there's always temptation to overcorrect, to make the big move, to secure the edge. Clipping moment number three. The most dangerous decision isn't standing still. It's making a massive move when you're already close. Now zoom out. What does this mean long term? If the Rams land Garrett and win a Super Bowl, everything is justified, every pick, every risk, every future concern. That's how this league works. But if they don't, then the cost becomes real. A thinner roster, fewer draft assets, a harder rebuild in the post-Stafford era, and that's the gamble. Because this isn't just a football decision. It's a timing decision, a philosophical decision, a bet on how much control you need to win at the highest level. In the end, the Rams being linked to Myles Garrett isn't surprising. It's inevitable. This is what they do. They explore the biggest moves, they push the boundaries of roster construction. But the real question isn't whether they can make this trade. It's whether they should. Because sometimes the difference between winning a championship and setting up the next decade comes down to one decision. And this is exactly that kind of decision. This is the kind of move that doesn't just upgrade a team, it reshapes everything. Because the Los Angeles Rams aren't just being mentioned around Myles Garrett Moreland, they're one of the few teams crazy and bold enough to actually pull it off. And that's what makes this dangerous, because if there's one front office in the National Football League that doesn't play by the usual rules, it's this one. Led by Les Snead, the Rams have built a reputation on one idea. If you're close, you go all in. No hesitation, no half measures. And right now, they're close. They've already made aggressive moves, added talent, positioned themselves in a division arms race with teams like the Seahawks and 49ers. This isn't a rebuild. This is a push. And Garrett fits that perfectly because he's not just an edge rusher, he's a closer. A player who doesn't just pressure quarterbacks. He ends drives, flips games, and dictates entire game plans. Coming off a record-setting 23-sack season, he's the kind of piece that can take a contender and push it over the top. That's the appeal. That's the temptation. But here's the turning point. This wouldn't just be a trade. It would be a gamble on time. Because everything in Los Angeles is tied to Matthew Stafford, seeing his window, his timeline, his remaining years. If you trade for Garrett, you're saying one thing: win now, no matter the cost. And that cost, it's massive. First-round picks, multiple. Young talent like Jared Verse or Byron Young potentially included. Future flexibility, gone. This isn't a tweak. It's a full commitment. Because once you make this move, there's no safety net. You don't get to rebuild easily after. You don't get to reload quietly. You either win or you deal with the fallout. And that's where the hesitation creeps in. Because the Rams don't need Garrett. That's the key. They're already strong, already competitive, already viewed as a Super Bowl caliber roster. This wouldn't fix a weakness. It would amplify a strength. And sometimes that's the most dangerous kind of move because it feels like the final piece, even when it might not be necessary. But don't ignore the pattern. This is the same franchise that has pushed chips to the center of the table before. And when they believe the window is open, they don't wait for it to close. So yes, the Rams are a real Garrett team. Not because they have to be, but because they're one of the only teams willing to risk everything, just to make sure they don't miss their moment.